Welcome everyone, it's Michael DeHaan from Quantum Leap Global, and I've got Cynthia Dearin with me today. How are you, Cynthia?
I am well, Michael. Thank you.
No, pleasure. Thank you for being a part of this. This is a women's empowerment series, speaking with the women, industry leaders, or business owners that have used their voice and visibility. And what I was really interested in connecting with you is that you support businesses to go global. And when you talk about using your voice and visibility, there's such a strong alignment there, because you really have to have a very strong message, and you really need to support them in regard to what that looks like in an international market, a global market. So looking forward to sort of learning more about that. So Cynthia is the founder of Dearin and Associates, and you've been running that business for 8.5 years.
Yeah, it is amazingly. It's gone fast and slow.
And you've just launched a book, which we might talk about a little bit later. I think you're supposed to have the launch there, and with COVID, it's sort of plattered around a little bit. But what I'd love to do is just get to know you a bit personally. So sort of a personal story around you would be great, and then we'll talk about what you've done in business and go from there.
Sure thing. Well, look, where do I start? I think it would be fair to say I have been interested in international stuff and also in business since I was a tiny child. When I look back, those are two themes that have kind of been woven through my entire life. I think I technically started my first business when I was about 4, when I ripped all the oranges off the old tree in the backyard and told my parents I was taking them down the front of the garden on the road to sell them with my tiny table and chairs. And they looked at me in pity because I was like 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and said, okay, this is 1982. And I came back about an hour later with $5 and all the oranges gone. And they kind of looked at me and went, wow, okay, didn't think that was going to happen. And then I was also really interested in international things. I remember doing a school project on Indonesia as a 7-year-old in year 2. And when I discovered that I wouldn't be able to go to Indonesia to walk around and do field research, I'd have to go to the library and take out books and underline things in pencil, I cried because I thought it was cheating and I wanted to go and do that stuff myself. So I think there's been real curiosity for me throughout my entire life. I was born in Sydney. My parents decided for some strange reason when I was about 7 that it would be good to give us a country upbringing. So they moved us all to northern New South Wales. And I went to school there, and look, I got a really hard time at school. So I got really badly bullied as a kid. And I think that did something a little bit strange to me, because I had had all this curiosity about business and about international stuff, and had been a very outward looking person. And that experience kind of turned me in on myself, and it sort of spoiled something. I think, it took away this curiosity, and it made me somebody who was very focused on achieving, because I figured, well, if nobody liked me, at least, I would be better than everybody else because I'd prove how smart I was. So kind of forgot about that for a while, focused on being the best I could at everything. And, I did okay at that. I went off and did a law degree. I got into the Department of Foreign Affairs as a graduate trainee, and then I got posted to the Middle East as a diplomat representing Australia by the time I was 25.
Wow.
And so I should have been absolutely overjoyed about that, right? Because everybody I knew thought I had the best job in the entire world. But if you had met me in about 2004, you would have found me in a corner office in a desert city in the Middle East, sitting there looking out over the desert, absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't actually doing a job that made me feel happy. Yeah. I didn't share the values of some of the people that I worked with. And although technically I was doing important work, I couldn't really see a tangible outcome from it. And so I didn't feel that I was making any contribution. And so a couple of years later, I went back to Canberra. I applied to do a Master of Middle East Politics in London, and I pulled the plug on the diplomatic career, to the absolute shock and horror of everybody I knew. People said, "You did what?" But people just could not. Some people still can't get their heads around the fact that I did that, but I just decided it was not for me. I couldn't contribute in the way that I wanted to. So I went to London, did a Master of Middle East Politics, thought I better have some more time back in the region. I better make something of this Middle East thing. I want to say, I'm a subject matter expert because I spoke Arabic by that time as well.
Oh, yep.
and French. I still have those 2 languages. So I went off and I worked in Iraq from 2006 to 2010. So I spent 4 years out in Baghdad working first for the British government and then for various bits of the US government, USAID and the Department of Defense, trying to help those institutions put Iraq's economy back together.
Yeah.
I think it would be fair to say it was a qualified success, but 2009 came along, Obama won the US war. So, a lot of this stuff is being framed by global events, and suddenly all the political will to reshape Iraq just dried up. And Obama said, we're getting out of here. And so all the funding and the American support really started to drain away or got pulled. And so the contract that I was on dried up after kind of quarter of the way through 2010. And I had the option of going to Afghanistan or maybe going back to the States or coming home. And to be honest, I'd been away about 12 years by that stage. So I'd been in France initially at university. I'd been in Egypt and the UAE and Qatar with the diplomatic corps. I'd been back to London for my studies, and then I'd been in Iraq for 4 years. And frankly, whenever anybody mentioned moving somewhere new, tears would just well up in my eyes involuntarily. And I thought, maybe it's a sign.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't go anywhere else. I don't think I can handle Afghanistan. I don't think I could have done Afghanistan after 4 years in Iraq.
Yeah.
So I came back here. I ended up running an industry association because hard as this might be to believe, if you are an Australian who's worked abroad, unless you worked in London or New York, when you come home, often what you did abroad is not really recognised.
Wow. I wouldn't have known that. Yeah.
No, a lot of people who have this expat experience find that when they come home, it's almost like they're migrating to Australia for the first time. So everybody knows you're Australian, you sound Australian, they can see where you went to university. But when you start to talk about your work experience, they say, oh, well, you don't have any local experience. We don't really know what to do with you. And I said, well, look, I've been putting a country back together. I'm sure there must be some transferable skills in there somewhere.
Wow.
But I couldn't quite find anything right. So I went off, ran an industry association, did some good work there. But look, again, it was one of these, what I like to describe as everybody thinks it's a solid gold job. And I like to say it's a plastic job with gold spray paint.
Yes.
It looks great, but when you kind of break through the exterior of it and you look at what's inside and what difference are you really making for people, I didn't find that there was really enough there to make me happy and make me feel that I was making a contribution. So in 2013, in fear and trembling, I quit that job and I started out on my own. And I had no idea how to run a business, I have to say. I had all this awesome professional expertise, heaps of professional services experience. I'm a lawyer. I'd run an industry association. I was like, this is not going to be that hard. Like, I've kind of done all these things. I'm sure I can pull it all together. And I got stuck and I'm like, wow, this is actually a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah.
And I think combined with that, when I started, I wasn't exactly sure what the offering was going to be. I could see that there was a massive opportunity, because I'd been living and working for most of my adult life by that stage. 21 to 33 or 34 was that stretch of time I'd been away. So pretty much almost since I'd left university to mid-30s, I'd been out in the world and I'd seen there was all this opportunity for businesses to scale internationally. And then on the other side, this big black hole, because hardly anybody really knew how to do it.
Yeah.
So I saw opportunity there, but back in the beginning, I wasn't quite sure what the route to plugging that gap was going to be. I started out very, very focused on the Middle East because I'd spent 10 years of my life on that.
Yeah.
That was what I understood best. And look, we did some great work in that space, but after about 4 years, I realized a couple of things. One, there wasn't that much demand for the Middle East in Australia. And secondly, in order to maintain my work there, I'd need to be getting on a plane at least once a quarter. And I wanted to have kids.
Yeah.
And when the first baby came along, after one business trip to him with him to the Middle East at 6 months old, I was like, I can't.
That's it.
I can't. I feel it's so stressful. I feel so bad for the person who came with me to take care of the baby. I feel bad for the baby. I feel strung out and exhausted. And I'm like, hang on, this business is supposed to be serving me and helping me create the lifestyle that I want. And it's not doing that at the moment. It's the other way around. I'm serving it and it's not doing what I want it to do. And so again, one of those fear and trembling moments where I'm like, oh, am I really going to do this? I just ripped up the business model, pretty much binned what we had and sat down with a sheet of paper and started over. Now, in among all that, I have to confess, I had the idea for what we do now back in 2014. So I'd had that idea, about a year after I started the business. But, sometimes when you're not sure exactly how to execute on something, you get scared.
Yeah.
And you think, I don't really know how to do it. So instead of, saying, well, that's okay, I'll figure it out, you just don't. And you keep on doing what you know, which in my case was this traditional professional services consulting stuff around the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so when I ripped up the model, I kind of said, look, I'm only going to give this one more shot. I'm in this place in my life where I have a small baby. I know there's probably going to be another child coming in a couple of years. Spoiler alert, that actually happened. And so I need to decide now what I'm going to do. And I thought, this is my last shot at it. If this does not do what I want it to do, then I'm not going to keep doing this. Maybe I'll go and be a mum, or maybe I'll, I don't know, go back to being a lawyer, or maybe I'll go back to foreign affairs and see if I can work there. I don't know. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Long story short, I made that switch, and that is the business that we have today. So thankfully, it worked out. And to just very briefly tell you what it is, we took the IP around scaling internationally and we made it market agnostic, which is to say we decided, okay, we're going to start from the place where we say we don't have any particular preference where you want to take your company. We're not going to say, well, hey, I know the Middle East best, so that's where you should go. We're going to start from a place where we work with our client to look at the data as it applies to their company and to say, okay, based on analysis, here are the couple of markets that will be best for you, given where you are in your business life cycle, given what you sell, given the market conditions at the moment. And we'll work with people like that. And so that's what essentially, the model that we've created and how we work with people now.
Wow. So you're looking at that demand. So where's the demand for that particular market, that particular business?
Absolutely.
As opposed to country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you will find that it breaks out along the lines that the export stats show, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, traditionally we've exported a lot to the US, and everybody wants to go to the United States because it's kind of this golden holy grail. Until very recently, everybody also wanted to go to China. There's always a fair bit of demand for Southeast Asia. And then everything else kind of falls in underneath that. Yeah. But, US, China, some UK, and then Southeast Asia are the key places that people really like to go.
Yeah, yeah. So Cynthia, as a 4-year-old entrepreneur,
yes,
starting up a fruit business.
Yes.
And that what I'm hearing is that natural sort of curiosity. So wanting to explore this universe, this world, and then the sort of bullying that you went through, and that's in a sense knocked that confidence and brought you more internally. And I was just interested because you shared that you had an idea in your mind about where you wanted the business to go. You just wasn't sure whether to fully act on it, and there was that sort of fear around that. And I just wanted to maybe dig a bit deeper on that, because that's what I see so often is the inner self, the intuition.
Yes.
Knows what to do, but we sort of lost that tapping into that.
Yeah.
Intuition and going, well, that's the right thing for us. That's what's going to bring us joy. That's how we're going to shine. So would we be able to dig a bit deeper maybe?
Yeah, sure. Ask me whatever you like. What should I comment on for you?
I think going down more of a safer pathway by the sounds of it, and you've pivoted and ripped up that business plan, which I love. And then just backed yourself. You said, this is it.
Look, I think looking back though, even earlier in my life, I had this business flair, right? So, I finished high school and I wanted to, I needed to go and get a part-time job. And, I was looking around. I remember like sitting there circling things in the newspaper, and my dad was appalled because I'm like, oh, go work in a sandwich shop. And my father's saying, you're not going to work in a sandwich shop. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, if you say so, I wonder what I can do. So I decided I would start a business waitering for people for parties. Yeah. And this is now a really common thing, but back in 1995, it was not that common. So I started off and I was getting paid $25 an hour cash, which, 25 years ago.
That was good money.
That was actually really pretty decent money for somebody who had no qualifications apart from an HSC.
Yeah.
And I started off on that. And I have to tell you, and yeah, I probably have forgiven her for this, but like I wish she had not done this. But my mother made me shut it down because she wanted me to go get a job as a paralegal because I was doing a law degree and she really wanted me to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think about this and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'd stuck with that, what would that business have turned into? Because, you know, all I did was I put a tiny one-line ad in the local, I think it was like the North Shore Times or whatever the local paper was.
Yeah.
And people started to ring up and hire me. You know, there was nothing complicated about what I did. I just had an idea and I acted on it. But mum was not super keen on that. So she said, oh, I think you should shut the business and you should go do the paralegal job. I really didn't like that paralegal job. Like, I mean, it didn't do anything bad for me, but I think it was not taking me in that direction that I was naturally inclined to go. Yeah. And so I tried to, I think I was very much steered into, you know, my parents are in the professions and they kind of saw me as somebody who should be doing a profession, you know, because I thought, oh, yeah, this is a bright person.
Yeah.
Get it. And I did, you know, I did really well academically, but my natural inclination, you know, which finally kind of popped out and just announced itself anyway, was I was always going to end up working for myself.
Yes.
Not just because I wanted to do it my way, but I think for me, I often find large institutions, you know, whether they're large consulting companies or large government departments, I find them frustrating because I want to do things quickly. I want to move quite quickly. I have a lot of ideas, so I like to be able to test stuff out. And I also want it to happen to a really high standard. So I really grate against bureaucracy and, you know, process for the sake of process and protocol and hierarchy, you know, none of that stuff really works for me. And so I think I was always going to end up working for myself.
And as you come across as that creativity, and I can't imagine you in an organization where you do have that bureaucracy and decisions take a year or 2 years.
Look, I hated it. I hated it. I saw people, you know, when I was in the Foreign Service, I saw people around me who were older than me, people with PhDs who'd been there 5 or 10 years, and they hadn't advanced more than a rank or two. And I thought, I'm going to be waiting 20 years to make a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my good friends is now our ambassador to Lebanon, but that's been a more than 20-year journey.
Yeah.
And for her temperamentally, that has been completely fine, but I'm pretty impatient. And you know, I like to kind of try and make an impact whatever I'm doing. So that was difficult for me. But I think on your point about intuition, yeah, I think we often, and I have to remind myself still, but I have learned along the way that I should listen to it's great to take advice from people and to get other people's input, but you should listen to your own intuition rather than making your decision on the basis of what somebody else says. Yes. You know, outside advice can often be crucial and it can save you from really serious mistakes. But I think you also need to filter it through, you know, the little voice that you can hear in your head that says, but what about this? Yeah. And not be too quick to say, oh, that, you know, that's not going to work, or I feel frightened, so I won't do it. It is also about timing, though, because, you know, I look at what we have built, and when I had the initial idea for what we do now, I didn't know how to do it. Yeah. And so I didn't do it straight away, but because I then accumulated knowledge over the course of a few years and I learned how to put that together, when I knew how to do it, then I said, okay, well, now I know how to do it, yeah, and I'll put it into play. It's been a lot slower because, you know, I factored kids in and my children are really important to me. And so, you know, I didn't want to outsource them 40 hours a week.
Yes.
I still outsource them a little bit, but I wanted to be there for them. And so I had to accept, well, the business is going to go quite a lot more slowly because I'm going to be spending a bunch of my time on them and not on it. But my take on it is, look, there's a season for everything. And you have to know, you know, when to put the priority on the kids or when to put the priority on other members in the family and when to put the priority on the work.
And I think you've always had that journey, and if it takes a little bit longer, it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I don't think you've gone on a different crossroad by the sounds of it. I could stand corrected, but, and thanks for sharing that, because I work with a lot of women and they can sort of derail what's important to them, what they were building when they start a family, and it's almost that sort of martyr mindset where they put themselves last, and whatever their dreams were,
Yeah.
or whatever brought them joy, they actually just park it for 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I love the way you just shared that it slowed down that journey, because you were still authentic to yourself and just authentic to your family as well. So that was just a great way of saying it differently, where, as I said, a lot of women just sort of go, well, I can't do that. I'm a mum now, or whatever the case may be.
And look, I'm really fortunate. I have a really supportive husband who has backed me up every step of the way. And who even sometimes when I've said, oh my goodness, I'm so tired, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to quit and just get a normal job. He's like, you don't have to decide tonight. Now's a really bad time. You're exhausted. Why don't you go get some proper sleep? We can talk about it tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. And so I say that a lot less than I used to, when the kids were tiny and I was getting 4 hours sleep a night and I could scarcely think straight. It was really tempting to give up.
Yeah.
But, I've been lucky because he said, well, do you back yourself? Do you think this can really work? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I really believe in what we're doing. And he said, well, then that's fine. Just please be patient. You're really bad at that. I'm like, yeah, I know. Please be patient and just keep going. And, let's see where you wind up. So, but I mean, look, on the family thing, I think it's a really tricky kind of question, because on one hand, if you want to go and be a mum and put all your energy into that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. No. And so I think women are in a really difficult position at times, because on one hand, we feel guilted if we pause our professional life. And on the other hand, we feel guilted by other people if we opt to be a full-time parent. And I don't think there's really a right or a wrong answer. It's really, really personal. And you just have to do what you feel is right for you in that moment. I mean, I think for me, on one hand, I didn't want to, like I said, didn't want to outsource my kids full time, because I'm really conscious that I only get one shot at that. Work will come and go, but you make that lasting impact on the family. But on the other hand, I think I would be a much worse parent if I was just being a parent. I had kids pretty late. I was 39 and a half when I had my first.
Yeah.
I was 42 when I had my second. And so I've lived, going on for half a century as somebody who's been engaged in academic pursuits and work and creating stuff and traveling the world. And to suddenly, turn that all off and suddenly just be doing Play-Doh in the sandpit, I think psychologically would have been really destructive for me and probably wouldn't have done my parenting any favors. So I think it's really tricky to get it right, but you just have to do whatever you think is the right thing for you at that moment in time, and obviously the right thing for your family too.
And I think that's a good way to say it, because it's, as long as you're honoring yourself.
Yeah.
So as long as that's not an external validation that you're doing it because society says that that's the way to do it, if it's coming from within,
yeah,
and it really does bring you joy, well then that's the right decision.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
Yeah.
So I know you just launched a book. I know you haven't been able to launch it publicly.
I've soft launched it.
A soft launch, yeah. But I'd love to, you just showed me before, but I'd love you to share that and just give a bit of a brief on that.
Yeah, totally. I'd be happy. So the book is this. It's called Business Beyond Borders, Take Your Company Global.
Yeah, lovely.
And I was saying yesterday on a call that, scaling a business internationally is a huge field of endeavor. And basically every chapter in the book deserves its own book. Wow. I did suggest that to my husband. He just about killed me. I said, I could do a book for every chapter. He's like, no, don't do that. But this book really attempts to kind of cover the field and to take you from the starting question of why would I even scale my business internationally, especially if I'm doing fine in my home market, right through to, what is the process of doing that? How do you identify the ideal client? How do you make sure your product is going to work for that client in a foreign market? What cultural hurdles are going to come up and how do you deal with them? What do you do about international marketing? If you sell goods, how do you get the stuff to market? What do you do about money? What do you do about regulations? And then lastly, how do you put a global team together? So it tries to tell you not the how of the entire thing, because there just wasn't enough space in the book, but the what. So, if you read this, you should come away with a fairly clear idea of what you need to do. And my proofreader who read it said to me, I have no I've never thought about expanding my business internationally, but when I finished reading it, I felt like I could. So
Wow.
I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's good. It
That's a
might
good
be
wrap.
okay.
And I'd ask a question, and we talked about safety before as business owners.
Yeah.
And I'd assume that a lot of people taking that global, their business overseas, there's a lot of emotion around that.
Yeah.
So you talked a bit around the sort of strategy side and, having it all structured in the right way, but are you also that sort of partnering with them around the emotional side, around that sort of confidence that, you do have?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't really like the term coach because I think it comes with a lot of bad connotations, or it can. Do you know what I mean? So I usually don't say I'm a coach, but look, essentially, my team and I coach people through that process. What we do is really coaching consulting. So, I mean, we are co-piloting their business into the international space with them. And on one hand, we are teaching them frameworks and giving them tools and showing them how to implement that strategy piece in their business. And also, connecting them up to the right people wherever we can and doing everything we can to help them make it become a reality. And on the other hand, we are holding them accountable. Yeah. And by that, I mean, not just holding their feet to the fire for things that they need to do, that they have committed to do, but also, encouraging them, just reassuring them that they can do it when they're having a tough time. Yeah. And, providing some community because, you will know as a CEO, it can be a very lonely journey. Yeah. And if you're an internationally scaling CEO, it's even lonelier because percentage wise, there are far fewer people who actually attempt that adventure because it's fairly scary for a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, look, we had a business owner who is still a client of ours today who rang me up one day, probably about 3 years ago, and said, I can't do this anymore. I've been bootstrapping the business for 18 years and it's just gone really badly. And we've just lost another client and I'm running out of money and I'm going to shut it down. I was like, no. Don't do that. Stick with it. We won't charge you any money for a little while. So we just said, look, I'm not going to charge you, but I do not want you to close the business. You just put your life's work into this. So we worked with him for a little while and didn't charge him. We helped him get back on his feet. After a while, he said, no, I insist that I pay you again. I'm like, okay, well, I won't fight you on that. He has gone on, completely turned the business around. And, it broke several million figures at the start of this year. Yeah. Where a couple of years ago, he was just going to quit. And I didn't do a magic trick. I mean, we gave him some salient business advice that helped him to improve things. But I think for that particular person, the most important thing was just that I said, and people on my team said, no, look, we believe in you. Yeah. The business is not a dog. You can make this a real thing. This is a really hard bit that you're going through, but just press on through it.
And I think that's your philosophy by the sounds of it. It's just that tenacity to just push through. I mean, in business, things get hard.
They do. But look, in life, things get hard. Exactly. And I think, look, I think I'm pretty determined, but I think when I think about it, I think that experience that I mentioned at the start of getting bullied was something that had probably really formed that characteristic in me. Now, look, there's a really good book by, I think it's Dr. Henry Cloud or Henry Bloom. I have to find the name. It's called Boundaries, though. And it talks about boundaries. And what it says is that people who get bullied often have this tenacity, but it turns into a bad thing because they don't know when to quit. So even sometimes they go way past the point where they should have stopped. Yeah. And I've had a few moments where I've looked at that. I was like, I wonder if I should have stopped and I'm just too bloody minded and I have to keep going, like despite myself. But I think, that experience for me probably really brought out that characteristic. Yeah. Because I went through, there was no 40 years ago, 30 years ago, there was no, I mean, you'll remember, there was nothing around bullying. Yeah, if your parents went to the headmaster and said, my kid is being bullied, the headmaster would kind of shrug their shoulders and say, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know. What do you want us to do about it? There was no legislation in place. And so I went to school every single day and got bullied for a decade. And even though I would go home and bawl my eyes out, I would put my school uniform on every day and go back the next day. So I think when you go through something like that, you do develop tenacity. And the good thing is that if you've got to be tactful about it, but you can share that with people and you can encourage people to press on, you know. And I think the thing is that because things get hard in business, so many entrepreneurs give up just before the breakthrough. And, you know, I'm horrible at drawing, but I saw this awesome cartoon a while ago where it's got a picture of, two people who are tunneling.
Yes.
And like it says, you might have seen it, it's success on the other side and they're tunneling through, and, you know, one of them keeps tunneling and the other one gets to like the last inch and then just says, I can't do it anymore, and walks away and misses out on the prize.
Yeah, and I was just about to ask a question, you just answered it. So that's intuition. So it was really around people that are struggling. So women in particular running a business and they just sort of hit a ceiling there, they want to give in. And I think you said that, you know, a foot away or whatever, that's where the gold is.
Yeah, often.
And that's when you're so close there, and it's just trying to go that just extra meter.
Yeah. But look, also being kind to yourself, because often when we get when we want to quit is when we're emotionally and physically and psychologically exhausted. And that is not surprising because, you know, a woman who is an entrepreneur at the moment may also have 1, 2, 3 kids and a husband and a household to run. And she's doing either part or all of that alongside running the business. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find that kids are at least a full-time job. Yes. Thankfully, I have plenty of help with it, so I'm not having to deal with them all the time. But I get off the business stuff, and as soon as I open the office door, there are my kids. I have to immediately switch into parent mode and like read stories and cook pasta and do baths and do all that stuff. So, you know, I think women, men as well, but women in particular, because they feel very responsible, and we've been socialized to be so responsible for kids and household. We're juggling so much stuff, and it's when you hit that point of overwhelm that you start to want to quit. And so, you know, it's like the analogy of holding a glass of water. If you hold it for a minute or two, it doesn't hurt your arm. If you hold it for half an hour, your arm gets heavy. If you hold it for 5 days, you have to be carted off to hospital and, you know, get treated because it's so painful. And so I think it is about giving yourself permission to put it down.
Yeah.
You know, even temporarily, even to say, I'm going to switch this off. I'm going to not think about this for the weekend. I'm going to turn off all my devices. I'm going to keep the office door shut. I'm not going to do anything on this. And look, I'm pretty bad at this, I have to say. Thanks to my dear husband, I get constant reminders. He's like, why are you working on that this weekend? Like, it's the weekend, you need to not be doing that anymore. So that is not naturally a strength of mine. Definitely have workaholic tendencies, but I know, and I try to remind myself constantly that I'm going to do a lot better and I'm going to get a lot less exhausted and burnt out if I can discipline myself to put it down. And look, it's a discipline, because work can become an addiction like anything else.
Yeah, and I think you said before, after the bullying, you just wanted to excel.
Yeah.
So, and that can maybe come at a cost sometimes, especially if you've got other pathways, bringing up a family. And what you said before, and I'll use another word, but it's that compassion.
Yeah.
And I think as humans, we're not great at it, to give compassion to ourselves. And when we sort of learn that, and as you said, all the different roles, and not that guilt, or, you know, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's just, you know, being happy where you are and just having that compassion for yourself. So.
Indeed. Well, I think a lot of people feel that they're constantly being assessed. Yeah. You know, they're constantly sitting an exam, as it were.
Yeah.
And look, our society doesn't help that, because we get a lot of messaging which says your value is determined by what you've achieved.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that. You know, I believe that our value is that we're human. You know, we're created beings who are human, and that is where our innate dignity and value comes from. Really hard to actually hold on to that, though, with the barrage of noise and images and messaging that we get, because we're always being fed that line, well, you know, you're not good enough because somebody else achieved more. I think, you know, I've learned as I've gone along that no amount of achievement is ever actually going to satisfy you. I mean, it's great to achieve things. It's great to create things. It's great to help people, but that's not going to ever give you ultimate meaning. And, you know, I had that moment, I think, when my first child was about 9 months old, and I had one of those moments when I was just so exhausted and I wanted to give up on everything. And I thought, Oh, I feel like I've failed. I can't believe it. I've done all this work and I'm still having a really hard time and I'm struggling. And I feel so tired and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, and I stopped and I thought, hang on, you already achieved all these things. You're married to somebody who you are crazy about. You have this beautiful child. You don't have like any serious financial problems. There's nothing wrong with your health. Like, if you look at kind of everything that's going on in the world, you have pretty much everything that you need to be happy. If you're not happy now, when are you going to be happy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, reality check. I should just actually stop stressing about it and just say it'll take the time it'll take. If it's not perfect right now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, I'll work on it again when I feel well enough, when I'm not so tired, when, you know, my kids have everything they need.
Yeah.
So
and
I agree with you about compassion.
And that's a really good way to sort of finish that, because and what I heard there was that sort of gratitude, because again, we're not great at that. And there's just so many people I look after, successful business people, and you look at them and the most common thing that they say is, I don't have enough. I'm going, when's enough? Like, where
It's
do you
never enough.
Where do you stop that? It's like chasing the horizon. You go over there's another horizon. So whenever you're chasing, you're not living in the moment. So I think you've just provided some great storytelling, and thank you for being vulnerable around your sort of past and sharing that, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
My pleasure.
And just how you've sort of run the business there. And I think a lot of women will get so much value out of it, just hearing parts of the story there and reflecting back on what they're doing, and that'll give them that support. So I appreciate your valuable time, and as I said, adding to the Women's Empowerment series.
Oh, it's been great chatting to you. Thanks so much for having me along.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. See ya.